Welcome to the For Love of Rugby. Now, Australia have won the third and final test in Sydney in horrendous conditions. They were 8-0 up at the break, went on to win 22-12 against the Lions. So congratulations, Australia, in winning today. The series has ended 2-1 Coley. Congratulations, Australia. Congratulations, Lions, on securing the series. What is your immediate thoughts after the third and final test?
Well, Ben, I'm slightly puzzled. The game had a 30-minute plus lightning break in the middle of it. It was, I say, Sydney seemed to be rocking. Australia came out, Lions were a little bit off. It was probably lacked, again, the jeopardy of a third test match decider. But yeah, again, credit to Australia. They came out, the weather looked horrific, but Australia came out. They had got the big guys, Skelton, Tupou, kind of rolling and won the physical battles. And I think, in those conditions, they got the set-piece advantage at times, disrupted Lions' line-out, and they capitalised on those errors.
What impressed me, Coley, is that even though the weather was very, very difficult, that their ball handling, and actually they were still trying to build pressure with the ball. They won territory first. They got in the right areas of the field, but they weren't afraid, let's say, to build multi-phase, to do the short little passes, the forwards interconnect with little inside balls, little tips. And actually I was very impressed with the way they played. And I think in reflection, I think 2-1 is probably a fair reflection of the series as a whole, given the great game we had last weekend. And, today lacked jeopardy, didn't it? It did. It just didn't have that same vibe to it. Lions were so deserved in the first test in Brisbane. I think they did unbelievably well to come back and win in the manner they did last week. And today just missed that sort of edge and jeopardy. But I thought Australia was so deserved of their win. I thought when you're playing conditions like that, Coley, you need field position, you need to win collisions, and you need a strong set piece. So your field position's done from your kicking game, and I thought Australia got that spot on. I thought Nick White was exceptional. For someone to play their last game in a game like that and perform like that, absolute tip my hat to him. I thought he had a terrific game. And, we actually mentioned it, I think, after the first test, didn't we? And the halfbacks that Australia went with. And I said, I'm amazed that they didn't go with someone like a Nick White with all his experience to help Liner outside. And, I thought the way that he played today was terrific. He managed that game, got that territory. Then Skelton, once again, that guy is one of the best second rows in the world in terms of winning collisions, winning meters, being physical, bringing that sort of Etzebeth imposing sort of figure, like talisman, and sort of he was everywhere and into everything. Then you looked at, they're winning collisions, they're winning territory, and then the set piece fired as well, Coley, where the Lions didn't, they weren't winning collisions, the set piece didn't fire, they lost a lot of line outs, and equally I felt like they didn't manage that territory particularly well. I think Australia just edged them in that, and ultimately that was enough to give Australia enough opportunities to then be ruthless, which they were.
A lot of people will be saying that Australia wanted it more than the Lions. Is that too simplistic?
I'd say maybe that's a little bit harsh or disrespectful to say they wanted it more, because I think every team that have gone out for all three games have absolutely wanted it and been warriors in terms of their commitment and trying to bash each other and win for every scrap. So I wouldn't say that. I would just say that what Australia got right today was managing those conditions. And I think the Lions didn't manage those conditions, so therefore they never really got a foothold into the game. And, Australia were up 8-0, weren't they? And 8-0 in those conditions, when your set piece isn't firing, when you can't get opportunities or back-to-back opportunities in the half, it feels more than that. It feels more than an 8-0. And I just see it as Australia were very well drilled and accurate in terms of what they did today. And the Lions just weren't able to get a foothold into it. And some of that's totally credit to the way the Australian played. And some of that is just the Lions probably just lacked a few areas that didn't allow them to get a foothold into the game. So yeah, that's how I see it. I just think Australia on the day managed it better, were more accurate and got the job done. And the Lions just weren't able to get a foothold into the game. And like I say, some of that's their own doing and some of that's Australia's great work.
I will say I do think it's probably more of an emotional come down for the Lions, having won the series last week in such circumstances. And it almost I'm not saying, and this is personally speaking, but you've done the job. Yes, you want to go 3-0, but in the back of your mind, you've done the job. And I think almost then it sort of hits you probably the fatigue of the tour, as in you've been away for a long time. It's been a long season. you've won. And I think maybe some of the injuries as well, without trying to say anything, but like you almost, those guys, the bodies are at breaking point. And I think you saw that today with a lot of the head knocks and all that kind of stuff. Is like the fatigue just almost gets the better of you in some regards. And I think Australia probably, fair play to them, we said that last week about them managing that emotional drop off, and actually they came out, and I think that's where guys like Nick White and Skelton, who just fire you up and want to, you know, spark in fights and stuff like that. It kind of like Australia probably managed that really well in regards to they still are probably building for the Rugby Championship, whereas that Lions, you kind of like, this is the final time we're going to play together, and you're trying to build the emotional. There's always going to be emotion playing for the Lions. There's always going to be like that last playing together and stuff like that. But I think, you know, it's just you've won the series, and probably the drop off for the Lions emotionally was a bit more than, say, Australia. And I'm not going to say that counted, but it's a bit like when you see in the lightning break, it was kind of like the Lions were quite relaxed, whereas Australia were almost tense. And I guess that could work both ways. The Lions win the game, and at the end of it, you're like, well, Australia were too tense and the Lions were relaxed. So you can look at it either way. But like, it almost looked like the Lions were sort of, the Australia was sort of, we're on a mission. We've got a bit between our teeth. We're 8-0 up. We're going to finish this. And the Lions are a bit more relaxed in regards to like, we're 8-0 down. It'll be all right. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, and I'm not blaming anyone. You've won the series. You've done your job. And there's a reason not many Lions tests have won 3-0. You do there, you win the series, and then the opposition come out firing and full of emotion, that kind of stuff. And like their season's about to start in some regards, whereas Lions is finishing. So it's all those bits go into it. And it is too simple to say, and it's disrespectful to say Australia wanted it more. I admit that. But I think the emotions and everything pours into it. It probably has some form of bearing on the outcome, especially when you go behind early and you got to scrap and fight and things are going against you. And you've already won in the back of your mind, you've already won the series. So yeah, I think it plays a part.
Tell you what else sort of added to the kind of weirdness of today's game, of course, was the 30-minute interval, 2 minutes into the second half, Carly, with the lightning coming on. I've not seen that for a while, if ever, in terms of early in the second half. We obviously had America versus England about 3 weeks ago now, and the game got postponed by 30 minutes, but that was before the game. And it was interesting, actually. You got a little glimpse, didn't you, in the change room, see what was going on. Lions looked very relaxed, sort of in no sort of hurry, where Australia, you could see they looked a bit more, I suppose, intense. I don't quite know what to, but they had sort of two different vibes going on in the change room there. That was quite interesting to see. And actually, I thought this would be interesting to see who comes out with a bit more, extended break, extended rest, more opportunity for coaches to do more analysis, more opportunities to have small conversations about tweaks and what can be done. And I thought, right, let's see who comes out firing here. And it was obviously start with a penalty against Australia. And it leads to my Thatcher's gold moment, Coley, because off that liner and they build some pressure, which led to Taniela Tupou's lovely clean break. The guy is up the guts, mate. He can shift for such a big bloke, like firing all cylinders. Off he goes. Thatcher's gold moment. I'm thinking he's going to go all the way. He's going to do a great pass. He's going to do a show and go. But he slipped over and sort of dropped the ball. So, but that was for me, seeing a big guy shift like that, doesn't that just epitomise how athletic these guys are, to be that size, to move that well? Like, these guys are absolute phenomenal athletes. So that for me was my little Thatcher's gold moment. And again, it was just another example of Australia sort of building pressure.
That man's legs, he's listed as like 100. I remember playing in the autumn, like he was listed as like 148 kilos. He's about 6 foot tall, and honest to God, his calves are like the size of my quads, and I reckon both my legs together are the size of one of his legs. And he is, you see how explosive he is. And yeah, he was putting it about, and he's a ginormous man. He got Skelton behind him in the scrum as well, and yeah, he's very dynamic for such a large man. I'll give him that. Well,
his calves are that big, Cole. That's why he has his socks down. He actually can't pull his socks over his calves. Massive piece of kit, and he made a huge difference.
What I will say as well is guys like Fraser McWright and the Australian back row were jackling a lot and getting a lot of pay. The couple of times, those 3 or 4 times, I think, when they sort of paid to Lions attack, and that momentum just stalled for Lions, and just you could see the Aussies grow on the back of, like, they're almost sort of defending their own goal line, and McWright would come up with a turnover or a knock on and kind of stuff like that, and that really fed into the Australian game. I think that the weather played such probably a part in the overall game, and I think, like, you look at Test 1, the Aussies played pretty similar to Test 1, where they were sort of picking and going, trying to play for penalties. But when the ball is wet. And I think listeners have to understand it's so, as I said before, it's almost best playing without it, because you're basically a target. Like, guys can get off the line and they can hit you, you can spill the ball. And I think also today, when you look with Australia, when you've got big blokes like Skelton and Tupou, they can basically take a ball standing still, like a metre or two from the gain line. I'm talking about both sides of the face here, but they can catch it, land, and they'll almost land on top of you. Then the breakdown gets cleared and they almost slides forwards like a metre. And in those conditions, a metre is everything around the breakdown. And if the lines were caught offside multiple times, but it's almost like just the ability of the, we say mass moves mass. Well, it's like Tupou and Skelton were just literally almost walking into people, and not walking into them, but like Tupou and Skelton were basically carrying into the line, and even though hitting him 2 or 3 blokes, I think Aki got him once, but like a lot of time just falling forward, and then it moves the defensive line back. Australia will pick and go, move the defensive line back, Lions get caught offside. And it's so hard in those conditions when it's wet and slippery. You don't want to get caught in the back of the tackle. It's very tough to tackle those guys, and it's almost, you feel the game slip away from you in some regards, because the referees start peeling it up. The referee's penalising you at the breakdown, you're rewarding them. And it's just that battle of attrition. I say it's tough to get out of it. And obviously the Lions found today, I think it's when you've got those big men that make such a difference, they're going to win the arm wrestle. So you're going to have to find a way of getting out the arm wrestle.
I think from a nines point of view, if you're playing in those conditions, Coley, your job and your duty is to minimise the phases you have in your half. And it's about winning territory. And often to win territory, you're going to go to the air, you're going to kick it. But you don't want 3 or 4 phases to set up to manipulate that chance to kick. You're keeping things in the 15-metre channel. So if your winger, if they've kicked to you, your winger might have ran it back. You then go one ruck, make it nice and long, secure base, kicking contestable. Everyone, like the others are on their feet. They're chasing it like mad. You're trying to win the air. You're trying to tap it back. You're trying to win scraps and almost give that unstructured. And quite often you look to go kick on kick because the backfield's totally changed if they lose that first one. And then in terms of when you're in their half, again, it's a lot of play off 9. It's sort of big runner coming off you, short little connected passes, try and tighten them out, try and sort of almost eke out penalties. And you're almost looking for 2 quick speeder balls, and then you can release the backs. So it's a very different way of playing in those conditions. And I thought that's why Nick White totally bossed the game today. Like he had an outstanding game because he managed their half so well in terms of his kicking was on the money. He didn't waste phases, didn't waste energy coming out of his half, didn't give the Lions a sniff at trying to jackal or hit someone, the ball spills. So he was really efficient getting out of his half. And then when they were in the Lions half, just so much of it was coming through him, hitting a big runner, 2 runners at the line, hitting that second runner as both guys promote, almost going across that first runner to that second guy, just getting to that little seam of the Lions, then speed a ball, then coming off him again. So I thought he just completely dictated the game in those conditions. And that is a responsibility you have as a 9, I believe, when the weather's as bad as it was, because it was shocking. And the camera never does it justice. But it was awful. You could see a few times the camera changed just how difficult those conditions were. So I just thought, as I said, 3, 5, 9 were terrific for Australia today. And actually Lenny Katau as well was very important for them. He got through a lot of work carrying. So I just felt like you say, Coley, Australia muscled up when they had to. They were more efficient getting out their half when they had to. And the set piece, I think, is an interesting one. And what's your take on the line out? And why today did it sort of function as poorly as we've seen it?
Losing Mara obviously didn't help just for half time. But I think it was quite interesting. Like before the game, it sort of said that Dan Sheehan had a sort of 98%. I think he'd lost one line out in 40 or something on the tour. Whereas like you saw today, the wet weather, it's the problem with wet weather. Again, yes, you can have a dry ball and stuff, but you're more inclined to throw it to the front as a line-out caller. You don't want to sort of risk throwing to the tail and stuff because there's a wind and stuff, but it's wet, it's slippy, so you almost want to bang towards the front, which then sort of limits down your options. So therefore, the defence also know that, so then they can start creeping towards the front and making the error. You saw today Australia, they're defensively getting 2 guys in the air. Will Skelton's he doesn't jump in the air, but he can lift a bloke, and it just. You could see when the Lions also almost like Australia sort of got used to what the Lions were going to do, because I think when there's times when Lions trying to stretch Australia around the back, and previously they were taking on, in the previous 2 tests, they'd almost take challenged ball at the tail, whereas actually Australia getting blokes in the air and just disrupting it. And like in let's say those wet weather conditions, it almost takes just the slightest of touches and the ball can like skid through your hands and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, the set piece pressure, that definitely fed into Australia's game plan, and because the Lions never had any possession in the opposition half. We talk about trying to like make it what the Lions could have done, but it was almost like they couldn't get out of their half, or when they got into opposition half, they couldn't convert it. They'd lose the ball or that at the breakdown, and then Australia put them back in the sort of the tumble dry in regards to putting it back into their half and just stayed there. So the line out wasn't ideal. Credit to Australia, they sort of had worked, I think, out the lines, and getting blokes in the air and disrupting it. And I think obviously Lions as well, like it's a tough day, because then, as I said before, like you then struggle. Do we then go to the corner? Do we not want to go to the corner? Can we, you sort of look for tempo. Your line out's misfunctioning. It does change the state of how you play, and that can play into opposition's hand again.
Well, also, in those conditions, penalties, if you win penalties, they're just so...
You can talk about set piece. The game is built around the breakdown and discipline in those kind of areas. I think today you saw Australia, Lions had a man in the bin, because I think they had 3 on their own goal line or in that area of the field, they're offside. But in the first half, there was kind of like multiple times. Australia was going anywhere with their pick and go carrying. Yes, they were relying on Tupou and Skelton and big blokes, just almost like get them half a yard. But Lions were offside multiple times in that first half, just around the breakdown. Because it's tough, because I say, when it's wet, like the collision happens, and then with the breakdown clear out, the whole collision like moves half a yard or a yard forward. So then you have to sort of, as a defender, you have to retreat back on side. And if you're looking at the ball and stuff and the breakdown's moved, it's tough to get caught offside. And the referee was hot on the breakdown, hot on the offside lines at the breakdown today. And I think when you have ill discipline like there, or you can't, you can defend all phases, but all it takes is one where you're offside and the referee was hot on it. And then you're into the kosh, or Australia kicks the corner, or Australia just have another possession, or they can then go and strike and stretch you, then they can come back to the penalty advantage. And it's those momentums. As I say, that first half, I think Australia spent about 10 minutes and the Lions sort of camped in their sort of 22 and stuff. Again, they weren't really going anywhere, but it was just possession, time, pressure, perception of the referee that, Australia were dominant here. And that all just feeds into the sort of outcome of the game. And a lot of that game comes down to, I think, discipline and accuracy, which is like every game comes down to that. But in those conditions, like, you can't build a rod for your own back in that regard to defensively.
You absolutely can't. Do you think after today's result, and it being 2-1, and there was a lot of chat about Lions trying to go for 3-0, does it take a bit of the shine off the Lions, do you think?
I don't think it should. Right, I'm going to look at this from a different angle. If this was test 2, and last week was test 3, and it was 1-1 going into it, and we had last week's game at the death, or, last week's game this week, we'd be raving like no tomorrow about how great the series has been and how competitive it's been and everything like that. So I don't think you should take any shine off the Lions, no. I think Lions went there, did a job, won 2-0, and this game was probably, you caught Australia on an upsurge, and Lions on a bit of an emotional come down of winning. Like, you've prepped for 8 weeks to win a series, you've done it. Australia aren't going to roll over. And it was just a game too far in some regards for the Lions, but they'd already done what they'd come to achieve. So, I'm sure they'll be disappointed. I think Aaron DeFarrell said post-match, I know we're disappointed, but we should be unbelievably proud of what we achieved as a group. Lions stores are tough, and to do what we've done, I'm sure we'll be super proud of our achievements. And they will be. Like, you'd probably be disappointed straight after the game, and maybe tonight, but I think, like, as a group, like Andy Farrell said it there, like, You've won a test series in Australia. It's still historic, and it's still something that will live with you for the rest of your life, and you'll have all those memories. And, like, yes, you'll have that memory of that game last week in the MTG, and you'll have moments off the field, on the field. So, like, it shouldn't take anything away from the Lions. It might do in some parts of the media, I don't know, but, like, it shouldn't, because, like, they've set out and done what they wanted to do, which was win a series in Australia. And it's so hard to go 3-0. That was their aim, but, what they say, you aim for. I've been watching Quarterback on Netflix about the NFL, mate. And there's a bit there where he's like, you aim for perfect and land on very, very good. And they went for perfect, which was 3-0, and landed on very, very good. A series win 2-1. You take that, don't you? And everyone in history would take that. So, I think that you shouldn't take anything away from the Lions, and it proves to you how special, again, this is my long-winded rant, like, compared to where we were probably 4 years ago with South Africa, with no fans, all that kind of stuff. It's sort of, I think this Lions story has really brought back the excitement of the Lions. And yes, we can complain about Australia, we can complain about this and that, everything, but like the debate, the interest, like just everyone in rugby eyes on the Lions, like Australia playing like last week, that magic moment at the MCG, like it's been good for rugby, it's been great for the Lions. So no, I don't think you should take anything away from it. Maybe in the next 24 hours you might moan, but I think long-term view, it's been a great series for the rugby and the Lions and Australia.
Absolutely. 2-1 I think is a fair reflection of the series. I look at some of the rugby that's been on display has been, it hasn't necessarily been consistent, but some of the rugby on show has been fantastic. Test 2 will live on forever. Like one of the greatest finishes to a Lions game ever. Like fantastic. I think they should be unbelievably proud. At the end of such a long season, to come together like that, to build that cohesion, to go on tour, to build towards trying to win a test series, they ultimately have achieved that. I think they should be super proud of what they've done. I think they've done phenomenally well. I think the way that they played for the first 45, 50 minutes in test 1 was excellent. Second test was one of the best test matches I've seen in a very long time. And ultimately the job was done. And I think 2-1 is a fair reflection of what I believe has been a very good series. And, Australia are definitely on the upward curve. I agree with you, Coley. I think it builds lovely for them in 2027. And, the Lions should be unbelievably proud of creating history and winning a test series once again. And as you said, Coley, when you look at what the last one looked like and the fans and the engagement, to see the amount of sea red there, to see the amount of travelling support, to see so many people engaged in it, all across the 4 nations, at home and various places, it has been an awesome success.
I'm trying to think, like, does 2-1 make it more, like, in the future? Does 2-1 make it almost, you look back on it as not a better tour than if you'd won 3-0, you know what I mean? Because then obviously you look back at 2-1 and you go, Australia are actually really competitive. And when you win 3-0, it's a bit like, oh, Australia weren't competitive. But I think 2-1, as you say, is a very fair reflection. And it almost like improves in some regards the legacy of this team and the Lions.
Also, the thing is with the series as well, there's a lot of talking points throughout it that you can discuss, isn't there? Australia with some of their selections, then maybe they came in feeling like they were undercooked, which is on them ultimately. The finish of last week and then them finding form, almost last week and this week. And it just, there'll be a lot of sort of bits and bobs learned, I'm sure, from both teams. But I think it's been terrific. And I tell you what, Coley, if you're in that change room now, you might be a little bit disappointed because, the game fizzled out maybe. But as a whole, you will be having a beer, mission accomplished. You've won a series. You'll be enjoying each other's company. I think there'll be a post-match function in the Sydney Opera House, potentially. That's where we went in 2013, wasn't it? So I think they'll be going back there. And the nice thing is at the end of the series, they will be having a beer together, but they'll equally be having a beer with the Australian players. Those guys have been, knocking 7 bells out of each other for the last 3 weekends in a row. They'll be enjoying a nice beer together. They'll be catching up. They'll be connecting. And, those guys will be really sort of enjoying themselves as Lions. And I'm sure the Australians as well will be, they'll be disappointed, but equally they'll be able to have a beer together and, send off Nick White, having played so well, and send guys like that off who's been a great servant to Australian rugby. And, like you say, Coley, they can work on a bit of alcohol cohesion as they build towards the Rugby Championship.
Oh yeah, well, it's you're in that Lions change room, and I think you won't want those moments to end, because this is the last time the team will be together, the squad will be ever together, and it's not emotional, but it's sort of, I think it's a time for, like, you almost reflect in some regards, like you sit down with blokes that you've built great bonds with, you have a beer with everyone as a front row, as a tight five, as a pack, you have a laugh and a reminisce and what was happened on tour, and it is the end of the season for them, finally. And so, you sort of can relax. I'm sure they'll have, a great 2-3 days of fun with each other. But it is like, they're probably moments that you try and savour. And, in some regards, the way the tour ended probably makes them a bit more reflective, and you probably enjoy those moments rather than obviously being, if you're really like top of the world last week, so if it finishes like that, you probably just don't actually take it all in because you're just so excited about winning the series, whereas actually this week you're probably a bit more appreciative and you could be a bit more reflective on what's happened in this whole tour, and you say in those change room at that point, you have a beer with all the staff and stuff like that, and thank everyone, and say it's really, they're probably actually really nice memories in some regards, and you take today's test out of it, and actually you've built bonds with people, and I think the Lions as a whole, all staff members, coaches, everyone can just enjoy his company for a couple of days, and that's one of the really nice things about it.
We've also got to recognise what an incredible effort it is for those guys, because it's such a long season. These chaps have done the whole domestic season. They've done the autumn series, autumn international, back to club rugby, European rugby, back to club rugby, then Six Nations, European, back to club rugby, then on the Lions tour. It has been a monumental effort. So these guys also will be enjoying each other's company, certainly for the next 3 or 4 days, Coley, and then they will be looking forward to a well-earned rest, sitting on the beach somewhere, sun on the joints and patching up their bodies, because before you know it, and this is such a tough thing for these professional athletes, is before you know it, mate, they go again. And it's an incredibly hard thing to do on the back of a Lions tour, to sort of hit the ground running again in only a couple of months' time.
Those blokes have been going at it for almost like 12 months. Their bodies are in pieces. They're basically, they're willing themselves on to go once more into a test match because they love the game. They love each other. They want to play for the Lions and that kind of stuff. And like you saw, there was 4 or 5 injuries in the game, wasn't there? And I think that's just almost like because you've mentally willed it so far, and then it's the end of the season, and whether your mind plays a sort of, I don't want to say you relax, but you just see how much those guys it means to them to be playing, and they've almost pushed themselves so far, and now at the end of the season, it ends that way, you know what I mean? So it's almost like a mental refresh as well, I think, going into the off-season. But yeah, no, it's incredibly, for those guys, I think people probably don't understand how hard it is. The emotional up and down of, you play a season, you do your domestic season, you play for England, you play for Ireland, you play for Wales, all this kind of stuff, like you play for Scotland, ups and downs, international periods, back in the autumn. We were talking about November time, weren't we? And you go through all this season, you get picked for Lions, the emotional high, you still got the domestic season to finish, you then get meet up on tour, you have the emotional high playing for Lions, you have test 1, test 2, it finishes brilliant, like test 3, like it's so, the mental, physical toll on these guys' bodies, they fully deserve 2 months off, which a lot of them will get, but it is, these guys should be, say, credited for what they've done, and they should be allowed a lovely long rest before next year. Dan Sheehan said that all the team have agreed to come back to Australia in 12 years' time to recreate the tour. How good's that? But I tell you what, that's one thing for sure, Coley, is Australia is, and in my mind will always be, one of the greatest places to rugby tour. Like, it is just fantastic place to go and tour and play rugby in. And, you look at the fans, you look at the engagement, you look at the stadiums they've played in, like they have put on a hell of a Lions tour in many, many ways. I agree. Like, it's great what Dan Sheehan's saying there about meeting up in 12 years, because those are the kind of bonds that you build, and those are the kind of things that I think, like, you probably now have to, not say park the friendships you've made, but, in however long it's 3 months' time, 4 months' time, you're then going to be, like, playing against each other in Europe or in leagues or whatever it is. So it's one of those things, I think, like, the fact that you've all agreed to pick it up in 12 years' time, you probably find some of them might be like you Pollocks as well, probably still be on a tour. So, they could be touring in 12 years' time. So, yeah, it's a great thing to do. But those bonds you kind of build, and those kind of like, as I say, you could probably, that team could never meet each other again for 12 years in a random world, and then all come together and meet up in Australia on the next Lions tour, and they just pick it up like that and have a great time and reminisce and memories and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's one of those things that never leaves you, and I think it's a great thing for them all to have that experience to share and enjoy. Absolutely. And also, I'll just bring to your attention, Coley, that Ty Byrne has been named Player of the Series, so congratulations to him. We'll actually be doing our Alternative Lions Tour Awards on Monday's episode. And we'll be answering your questions with Anthony Watson. So drop us a question in the comments below. So there we have it. A Test Series 1, 2-1 to the Lions. I feel that's a fair reflection of the series as a whole. Australia were very good today, deserved of their win. And those boys will carry on for a few more days to create some last-minute memories. And by the looks of it, actually, Coley, I'm guessing Genji might be pulling into getting off the plane in Turkey on the way home. He's either gone for a new haircut or he's preparing for a plug. He looked good. I liked it. I liked it a lot. But yes, we'll be back on Monday, so we'll see you all then. See you then. For the love of rugby. If you want to drop us a line, get involved with our socials. Just search for @LoveOfRugby. And if you've listened to all our episodes and need another podcast, go and find Joe Marler's Things People Do. See you next time.